Hey guys, and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to go through and continue where we left off last time. What we did, we just installed a couple of add-ons once we finished setting up the initial Home Assistant. Today we're going to go into ESP and set up our first custom sensor. So there's a few initial configurations that I usually like to do, and then some additional items that I usually add when the ESP devices are being set up. Today we're just going to set up a relay and a temperature sensor, temperature and humidity sensor, just as a quick example. In some future videos, we may go into setting up some automations within ESPHome as well as within Home Assistant, but for now we're going to do the very basics of just adding a relay and a temperature sensor to our ESP device. So with that said, let's go in and take a look. There we go. So back in our install of Home Assistant, you'll see we still have the same information we set up last time, a couple of the add-ons that we installed. Today we're going to go into ESPHome right here, and this is a bit different than the previous videos that I have. A lot has changed in here, and even the website is looking like it's beginning to change as well. But for this one, we're just going to go in and configure our Node MCU that I have with a relay. So to set up, what we're going to do from here is we'll go through and just set up a secrets file. I would always recommend this. I'll leave a link in the description to a written article, but the most important two things that I usually leave in here is a username and password for my Wi-Fi network. Obviously you can expand upon this, but this is just for simplicity when setting up. So I'll leave this code on my website on the written article. We can just go in and copy the secrets file with some additional options that you can add in here as well, like MQTT in the future if we need to have that. That's just to simplify the setup when we do add new devices. So while we're in here, we can just go in and click on add a new device. So this is going to ask us a couple of things. We have the option to do it from their website, or we can just click on the continue button right here. So the first thing it'll ask us is the name of this device. So in my case, this is just going to be a test board. So I'll just call it test MCU and then hit the next button right here. Now it's going to ask us what type of device we currently have. In my case, I have an ESP8266, so that's the one I'll be selecting right here. And as you can see, it already added it back here, and then also asks us if we can go through and set up additional options. So right now, I'll just click on the skip button right here, and you'll see we have that device in here. Now, obviously, we haven't flashed this to our ESP yet, so this is just the base code that we have on here. So once we go in and we hit the edit button, you'll see we have some code in here. Now, this is fairly straightforward. It's just some standard code that will always be set up when you initially set up your first ESP device or any ESP device. You always have these options in here. Normally what I do like to do is remove this encryption key because I have run into quite a few issues with that once that has been enabled. So I'll usually just remove that from there. Password, you can leave that in there. I'll just leave it, that's okay. Wi-Fi, so it's just going to use that secrets files to add in my Wi-Fi SSID and password. And then the fallback hotspot, that is just a hotspot that will be created if the device cannot connect to your Wi-Fi network. And that's the base setup. So strictly speaking, we can go in and hit on save and then select install. Now you have a couple of options, and obviously we can't do it wirelessly because it hasn't been connected to our network yet. It's a fresh install. So normally what you would do is, depending on the way it's set up, you can do and say it is plugged into this computer. So I can plug this ESP device directly into this computer. So I'll just hit on plugged into this computer, and you'll notice that it's telling me that, hey, I'm not running my Home Assistant instance over HTTPS. So I can't use this section right here. So what I'm going to do is I'll need to compile it and download it. So as you can see, it's busy preparing the download. So it's compiling the information in here, and then it'll give me the option to download that bin file from the website. Once it has been downloaded, we can go through and open up ESP web interface and then flash it that way. So I'll just have this run through, and then once it has been completed, we can go through and I'll show you how to flash it onto your ESP device. And there we go. So as you can see, it has finished compiling that information and the project is ready to download to my computer. So I can just hit the download project button. It'll come up here. I can just go through and save as, and then save that in my downloads folder. Once that has been completed, we can go through and start flashing the device. Now, what we need to do is we need to plug in our ESP as well. So if we go through, I'll just give you this camera view as well so we can see the devices on here. I'm going to open up my ESP web right here, and it's going to ask us to connect to our device. So I need to plug this in to my computer. And once that has been connected, I can just click on the connect button right here. And it's going to give you quite a few devices here. So you'll need to make sure you select the correct COM port that your device is connected to. Normally you can see that by right clicking on your start bar and then just click on device manager right here. And then if you scroll down to your COM ports, it's usually that Silicon Labs driver that has been installed on that device. So I can use that one. Unless you're using an FTDI programmer, for example, but we'll cover that in a different video. So if I click on connect right here, you'll see I have that is on COM port 3. So I can just click on connect. Then we have the install button. It's going to ask us to choose a file. I'll just go through here and click on my downloads and then select that test MCU file and hit the install button. And that's going to connect and install or flash the firmware onto our ESP device. Now, in some cases, you may need to press down or hold down the reset button when you are starting to flash it, or it may get stuck on connecting like this until you have that set up. So if this doesn't work, you may need to just unplug it, hold down the reset button and plug it back into the computer and then try and flash it again while holding that reset button. So I'm going to unplug it, hold down the reset button on my MCU device. I know you guys can't see this, and then replug it back in. And then I'll just hit the retry button or close and then just hit connect again and select that COM port and go back to the file that I have here, install. There we go. And as soon as it starts erasing, you can let go of that reset button and it'll erase and then flash in the new firmware. There we go. We'll just wait for that to finish. In some cases, it could also be the flash button, depending on the type of device. You can just check and move through those, but we'll just wait for this to complete and then we'll go through the rest. So as you can see, it tells me that the configuration has been installed. So I can just go in and close this. We no longer need to have this page open. We can go back to our Home Assistant, close these out, and close this one as well. And as you can see, it shows us that it is online now. So if we click on the log file right here, you'll see that it gives us all the information, the Wi-Fi strength, and that it has been connected, as well as the IP address of this specific device. So now we have it connected, so we no longer need to have it connected to our computer, but we still need to go in and flash some information so we can start controlling devices or read the information from our DHT11 sensor. So to do that, what I'll do is I'll click on the edit button once again, so we are back on this section. Now, one thing that I do like to add in here as well is the web server section, and I'll leave all this information in the written article as well, but always the first thing that I normally do is just add in a web server in there. That means that you can always access it directly from the IP address. It'll give you the option when you go to your ESPHome page. You'll see there's an option that it will give you also to click on visit. Then you can open up that device directly instead of having to add it to Home Assistant in order to control or test some devices. You can just use it through the web server directly. So now we have everything installed and we need to start thinking of how we're going to connect these devices. So I have my relay right here. So let's quickly take a look at this relay. Sorry, I need to move this thing weird. And on this relay, you'll see a couple of things. So there's 3 pins right there. One is called VCC, one is called GND, and the other one is called IN. Now, these names can vary depending on the device that you're using. In this case, VCC, and in most cases, VCC is going to be your positive input or your 5 volts in. These normally function as 5 volt. As you can see, it shows it is a 5 volt DC trigger for this, and it can run up to 10 amps at 250 volts or 15 amps at 125 vac. And the last pin in there is going to be the IN pin. The IN pin is going to be where we connect the ESP to send the data saying, hey, you need to turn on or you need to turn off. And that'll switch the state of this relay. You'll see there's also two lights. That's hardware based. That's on there. It's just an indicator letting you know if this relay is on or if it is off. The red light will just be if there's power to the relay. The green light will indicate if the relay is on or off state. The other side on the relay is you'll see we have three options in here as well. So we have NO, COM, and NC. So COM is going to be your common wire. That'll be your main wire. So in normal circumstances, what you would do is you would cut a negative or a positive wire, the thing that you want to turn on. So it'll work like a switch. You cut that and then feed the power or the negative wire into that COM port, meaning that that's where it's going into, and then the output from the other side where it needs to go to the outlet or the thing that it needs to power your lights or whatever you're connecting it to can go to one of the other ports. The other ports is that NO or NC ports. Now NO stands for normally open, meaning that if this device does not have any power, like right now, that NO port will not supply any power. So you can put in as much power as you want, it'll not turn on anything at all unless you manually send a signal to say, hey, turn on that device. The NC port, on the other hand, is for normally closed, meaning that these two ports, COM and NC, is connected at this moment. So it'll send through as soon as your ESP or this device loses power, it's going to send that power through to the other end where it needs to go. So that's the difference. You can always manage it in software as well, but on the hardware side, it's really important to note, if this device loses power, do I want it to send electricity or whatever I'm trying to power on to the other device, or do I need it to turn off completely? Now, for the code that we need to add in here, so obviously we need to tell the ESP like, hey, this is what I'm going to connect to you. It is fairly simple connecting these devices, especially with the vast amount of documentation that's available on ESPHome, and it's being maintained a lot. It is changing as well. I saw that they are changing the way the interface on the website works, but for now, you'll see that right here. If you search on ESPHome for a switch, because that is what we are currently going to use, a switch is just a GPIO. We need to specify the pin and then also give it a name. So what we'll do is we'll just go through and copy the sample code that they have for us right here and add it to our code in this section as well. So we'll just paste that in here. So we have, it is a switch. It's going to use the GPIO of the ESP. We need to specify which pin, and then it'll also have a name. So what are we going to call this specific device? In my case, it is just a relay that's connected, that's going to be connected to the pin. For the pin, depending on the way you're specifying the board itself, you can try and use D1 or D2. In my case, I always recommend using the GPIO pins. Finding these are fairly simple. I know random node tutorials have very good documentation on the node MCUs. So if you open up their website, you'll see right here, they give you all the pinouts on the node MCU or even all the ESP devices. They have ESP32s and everything. They'll show you pinouts instead of it being D0, D1, D2, because sometimes these can be mislabeled as well. I can show you an example. This board that I have right now has D0, D2, D2, I think, listed on it. But this is an easy way to identify the actual GPIO, and I would always recommend using the GPIO instead. So to connect it, what we need to do is we need to connect the VCC and the ground to our ESP, and then we also need to connect the IN pin, which will be our data pin. And let's say I want to use D1. That means it's going to be GPIO 5 that I need to use on my code right here. So under the pin, we'll go through and type in GPIO, and I'm going to do 0, 5. And that's it. So that's the basic code that we need. So we can just hit on save and then hit the install button. Because we've already flashed, we can just click on wirelessly and that'll go through and install the information to our board. As you can see, that's fairly quick. And once it's on there, we're good to go. I'm going to stop this and quickly connect up the relay itself. So I'll do that and then I'll just show you how I connected it afterwards. So there we go. I have connected these. So right here on the relay, you'll see I have connected the red wire to VCC, the orange wire to the ground, and then the yellow wire is the data pin. Now on the ESP itself, we do not have a 5-volt pin to power this device, but because I'm only going to run this ESP device with the single relay, we should be okay running it from the 3.3-volt pin and then the ground and then also D1. Obviously on this ESP, like I said, for some reason it has two D2 pins, but remember that is the GPIO that we have specified, so we should be good on that one. So with that said, we can go in and just power it up and see what happens when we open back or when we go back to our system. So I'm plugging it in. As you can see, this thing instantly powered on. So we can just double check the indicating lights right here. The red one means that it has power and the green one means the relay has turned on as well. So we can take a look what's going on in there. So back in our ESP, we can just click, we'll see we have the option to visit now as well. So if we click on that visit button right here, you'll see it opens up that relay and we can also see the log file. So if we click on log files right here, it'll show us the log. But we open up that device. So instead of adding it to Home Assistant as a device just to test it, if you add in that web server, like I showed previously, it's easier to just access the ESP directly and then seeing like, hey, how things are working. Now, as you can see right here, we kind of have an issue because it shows the current state is off, but on our relay, that green light is on, meaning that the relay is actually on. And if we turn it on, it turns off that relay. So it looks like this one is reversed. So if we go back to the documentation right here of that switch, if you scroll a bit down, you'll see we have a inverted option and we can set that to true. So we'll just copy that, go back to the code of this board, you can see the logs updated as well. We can just hit the edit button and then just below the pin number right here, we can just add in that inverted to true and hit save and install to update that on this board as well. So we'll just wait for that to complete and then we can test it out. There we go. So that uploaded. So if we click on the visit button now, and we can see that the green light is off, indicating that that relay is not currently turned on. If I hit the on button, you can see that it turned on that relay. And that is it. So now we have configured the relay. If we go to the log file and we make any changes, so it's turning on or off the relay, we can see we can now modify that. And you'll see Home Assistant already is giving me a notification telling me that it picked up a device. It discovered that ESP device already. We can go into that a bit later. What we want to do now is see if we can also add this temperature and humidity sensor. Now with this one, it almost has the same ports, exactly the same. So we have a positive and a negative. So as you can see, these two are on the sides. We have a positive on one side and negative on the other side, and then we have an out. So it's just named out. Sometimes on these you have to check the back of the board to see if you can find the pin out. But this one seems to be the middle pin, which is the output pin to our ASP, and then we just have a positive and a negative. So let's take a look if we can find the code on the ESP's website for this one as well. So right here, I already have it open. So if you scroll down, we have that sample in here. Now you can see this is a sensor and it's not a switch. So if I copy the data right here for this one and add that to the board right here, and as you can see, we still need to specify that pin. This one is showing D2 right here. Obviously, we don't want to use that one. I'll just make sure that I have, if it says D2, I'll just make sure that it is GPIO4 instead for this one. So the platform, it is a DHT. And then on the pin number, just make it GPIO 04 in there, and then I'll just call it DHT as well. And then the same for the humidity. Remember, it's a 2-in-1 sensor, so I need to add that in there as well. Maybe let's just do it DHT humidity so it makes a bit more sense. DHT humidity, so we know the difference between DHT. Let's call this one. And the update interval is how much time it'll take to update each time. I'm going to change this to 10 seconds. That's going to be up to you. Remember, the more you do it, the more strain you put on the board, as well as the more data it'll use. Not that it uses a lot, but it is there if you are running a board with a lot of sensors. Now with these, you can see now we have two different types in here. We have a switch and we have a sensor. If you want to add additional relays, you do not need to add this switch again. All you'll do is you'll just use this same code in here. And we can copy that and just go down a bit. Make sure it lines up and then just hit paste. And then we have, because it's already a switch, we're just using the GPIO, update the pin that it's connected to, and also the name, and then plug that relay into that one. The same with sensors as well. You can't have switches listed multiple times, so all your switches will be listed under switch, all your sensors will be listed under sensors, and so forth. We don't have another relay, so I'm just going to leave that blank. We added the code for the DHT on GPIO 4. Going to hit save and install that code to our ESP. Now this is going to download again the framework for the DHT sensors, so it's going to take a while, but I'll get back to you once that has been completed. So that has completed, and I would recommend unplugging your device before sensors. It's fairly easy to cause issues. So in this one, it's going to be connected the same way. So I just connected some DuPont connections right here. We have our power, our out, which was going to be the purple one, and then the ground for the gray cable right there. So again, I'm going to use the 3.3 volt pins on the ESP to power this, and it is normally 5 volt sensor, but it should work fine for this use case. That is the 3.3, then ground, and then we said that one is going to be for D2. Now I have that plugged in there, and there we go. So now I have both the sensor, the temperature sensor, and the relay plugged in here. So we should be able to go through and power that up. The relay and the temperature sensor is both on D1 for the relay, and then D2 for that temperature sensor, or GPIO 4 and 5. So if we go to the logs right now, we should start seeing that update the temperature and humidity of that board. Every 15 seconds, I think we added it in there. There we go. And as you can see, it is currently 26.7 degrees Celsius with 57% humidity. And that's it. So now we have a relay and a temperature sensor. If you want to go through and add that to Home Assistant, you'll see that it already shows that it discovered the ESP test board. So we can just click on Configure, Submit, and then select the area we would like to add that to, hit Finish, and now it is going to show up in here. So we have the temperature and the humidity of the test board, and then also that relay that we can turn on and off on this board right here. So turning on and off the relay, there we go, and we are getting the temperature and humidity from this board. And there we go, guys. That's going to be it for this one. I try to keep it as short as possible. That's why I just use one relay. I showed you how to add additional ones if needed, as well as the pinouts and how to connect a temperature sensor. And in the next one, we may take a look at some more ESP stuff, making it a bit more advanced, or setting up some automations within ESP without even using Home Assistant, which may come in handy in certain situations. But with that said, I hope you guys have a fantastic rest of the day.